Welcome to the Angie Creates podcast. I'm your host, Angie Wang. In this podcast, I interview curious humans on how they become the most alive versions of themselves through creative expressions like movement, art, and writing. 欢迎来到 Angie Creates， 我是你的主持人安吉。在这个节目呢，我喜欢和来宾们聊聊关于数位游牧、写作、艺术和身体训练的不同主题，探索如何活出最精彩的人生。Today, the guest of my podcast is João let me pronounce it again. João Mateus. João Mateus.
That's good. That's
nice.
good.
I still remember the first time I pronounced his name wrong. So I met João when we were traveling Portugal, Lisbon in this tutor meetup. And we happened to sit right next to each other. And later we found out we have so much in common. But João is way further on the path of being a trainer for online education, especially for adult education. So today I'm super, super excited to have João on my podcast to talk about everything regarding adult online education. And he has a very interesting background. So he is a Portuguese educator and thinker. He has a degree in jazz guitar and developed his entrepreneur mindset when he was a teenager, being an active musician. But after a wrist injury, he co-founded a training company and worked with thousands of people and hundreds of companies as a trainer, coach, and designer of learning experiences. He co-founded an NGO focused on teaching soft and meta skills and became a pedagogical coordinator in Entrepreneurial Gym. Okay, this is a lot to unpack, but first, welcome to the podcast, João.
Hi, Angie. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so today, in addition to talking about online education, we'll also talk about what it's like to be a bilingual creator on the internet. This is something that blew my mind. Like, okay, at first, Pastel de Natal is like super popular in Taiwan. That's like one thing I found that is similar between Portuguese and Taiwanese culture. And then the food is so similar. And then when I talk to João, my mind is blown away by how similar we are. We're going to dive into that later. So I want to ask you the first question. How did you get interested in founding a training company after your music career?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, once again, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and I really hope that this conversation adds value to both of us and maybe to someone listening. So how did I get interested in creating a corporate training company? So that's a complex answer. I'll try to give it a short answer. So because I was a musician and I was I had to develop as a teenager this entrepreneurial mindset because I was trying to sell my music, trying to play with the best musicians there was, and I also wanted to make some money. So the easiest way to make money as a musician is, contrary to what people may think, not to play, but actually to give classes. So I was 15 years old when I gave my first class. And I remember, like, I really enjoyed it. Like, I had a colleague that wanted to learn a specific song on the guitar, and so I taught them. And so that education has always been present ever since I was a teenager on like my professional things or areas. And what happened was I wanted to be the best jazz guitar player in Portugal, and I had a wrist injury, as you mentioned in your lovely intro. And with that recent injury came the realization that to achieve what I wanted to achieve, I had to practice like 7 to 8 hours every day, and that was just not possible with the wrist injury. So I started to realize, well, what else do I want to bring to the equation? What else do I want to do, professionally speaking? And one of the things that popped in my mind was, well, I was always a very positive person. And I had a lot of friends that weren't. And I always asked myself, like, why is not everyone as positive as me? And that led me to also question, like, why are people very good at what they do? And why are people that are not that good at what they do? And so I started to read about that. I started to read about psychology, about biology, about history, about philosophy, anything that I could lay my hands on, and to work on what I call the human potential question. How can we help human beings to develop more potential? And so, after doing all that research and after trying to understand how our minds work, eventually, when I finished the degree, because even though I had a wrist injury, I ended up finishing it. I just decided to co-found a company, just trying to share these ideas with people that would find some value. And so, me and two other co-founders, we created a company called Academia do Sim, which in English is Yes Academy, and we basically started to give training sessions to companies. One of these individuals was already a trainer, and she was very very good at it, and so she had some companies that wanted to work with her. And so basically when we created the company, those were our first clients. And yeah, basically that's it. That's how I decided to co-found it.
Okay, so what is the experimenting process for you when you after you had an injury and before you founded a company? And is it
Mm.
I imagine being a like devoted into music industry wholeheartedly, not being able to play, it's something that is probably devastating. Can I use the word to describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. So usually when I'm introducing myself, I say that the wrist injury allowed me to realize that I wanted to be a corporate training, and I make it look like it was so easy and so obvious. It was not at all. Like, if you entered my room when in college, when I realized that I wouldn't be able to play, like there were days where I would literally just be like laying on the ground or just hitting my head against the wall because I had no idea what to do. It was very very hard, just because I at that point I had been playing for like 7 years every single day. So when someone told me like there's you cannot play the guitar, and I was like, you have no idea, no idea. Like I've been playing every day, I won't stop now. And then I remember the doctor just making giving like with a smirk saying, well, you either stop playing for a while and then maybe you get back, or you continue, you will basically destroy your wrist and you'll never be able to play again. So that was very hard. Like the experiment process was actually, it took me a while to understand like that I wanted to do that, because I did a lot of journaling back then, just trying to understand like what were some of the things that I was good at, and what alternatives there was. And so after spending a lot of time writing, I realized that music was the language that I knew that allowed me to inspire people. And because I was playing jazz, meaning most of what I was playing was just improvised based on what I was feeling. Like if I connected with someone, it was because the way that I communicated my emotions through music resonated with the emotions that that person was feeling, because once again, I was just improvising what I felt like. And so I realized, well, if I want to inspire people, I can do it in many different ways. And so that led me to, when I was a teenager, actually always growing up, like I was like, I think almost everyone has that friend where if you're having some kind of dilemma or problem or issue, you go talk with them to try to figure out what to do. Like I was that friend to most of my friends. And so I realized, like, okay, I'm good at listening to people, and trying to come up with solutions for their problems. Can I do make a living out of that? And I had like the person, the two individuals that co-founded the company with me. One of them was already she was already a trainer, and so I would look at her, and she was also a coach, and I would look at her, and I would think like, oh, maybe I can do that as well, right? uh and so all that mixed with the very natural feeling that I had when I was like on stage, meaning speaking to someone. I didn't had problems doing the public speaking or talking with people. It just made me realize that I wanted to inspire people. And so I tried two or three different things. I tried through writing, and it didn't resonate that much because I didn't like it. People would like it, but it wasn't the medium back then. Uh, and I tried to make a workshop. Basically, I decided to that I wanted to make this 4 hour workshop to see if things would go good. And I did it. I loved it. People loved it, and basically that was it. I was hooked.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. It I just found another similarity.
Oh,
So
really?
I think I shared with you like before I was a trainer and I had no experiences in training people. I mean,
Hmm.
physically, I was a fitness coach, and then the reason why I became a fitness coach is because I love lifting so much. And at
Mm,
that time, I thought the the meaning of my life of existing in this world is to empower female through lifting. And so
mm,
lifting became the focus. And immediately when I went into coaching, I had an injury. That injury is so bad that even these days, whenever I train, it hurts. So like that, I quickly realized that the energy I have to give out in the coaching space, like literally in a gym, and the injury that was bothering at midtime, just like physically I couldn't do it anymore. So
mm,
what other things I can also do? Still, that is still empowering people through fitness, and that's how I discover like online education and all the stuff. And now I think
mm.
that's also the time I really started to think like, can I really only empower people through fitness? I found out
Yeah,
like the thing I love is inspire people to find out that they actually have ownership of their life. They have the
yeah,
autonomy to decide what their life want to be. At first
yeah.
it's through fitness, but now it's through other media and online education, creativity, arts, writing. So like
Yeah.
yeah, but even till these days, what I get out of training, physical training, is still inspiring me and then like build the angle of how I see so many other things in the world. So I
Mhm.
wonder what's your relationship with music right now?
Yeah, so I know that you're familiar with rite of passage, and I remember once I saw David sharing that one of the first things that they ask in rite of passage is for you to write an essay on the question that people ask you the most. Like the question that people ask me the most is that like, how's your relationship with music, or don't you feel sad about leaving music after all those time, all that time? And so I actually wrote a piece on that, and it's like so music is very ingrained and integrated into my worldview. It helped me to see a lot of things in a way that I think it takes some time for other people to see it that same way. So what I mean by this is, uh, so some basic things like I have this theory that if you learn the basics on a music theory and improvisation and how music works, you'll be able to live a better life. One day I will write a book about this because so I still play. I'm able to play the guitar. I cannot practice like for 5 6 hours every day, but I'm able to do some concerts and play a lot. Like last this year, actually, I gave a bunch of concerts already, and I'm slowly getting back to it as a professional thing to do. But in terms of my worldview, like there are so many things that music helped shape. So one of them is uh, so I believe that every day when you wake up, you have one of three things will happen. The first one is you plan your day and everything goes according to plan, 100%. Usually it does not happen, right? Then you have the second choice, which is okay, you wake up, you plan your day, and something goes. Most things go according to plan, and others not that much. Okay, it happens sometimes, but like the most common one for me and for the people I talked with are basically you plan your day and then life happens and suddenly you have you're in certain situations where you didn't prepare, so the only thing that's like the only thing you can do is to basically improvise. So if you look at life from this lens, what happens is you spend most of your life improvising, right? So this conversation, like you send me some of the questions, but and I could practice like the answers, but like the conversation will be improvisation, right? And so what happens is I spent like 7 years of my life just practicing the craft of improvisation. Like, because since I was studying jazz, I was understanding how to improvise, how to react to things, how to respond, how can I listen to things, what do I want to say, how to prepare for an improvisation. Like, all those things that were related to music, I quickly realized that there were like these meta skills that I could use in other fields. I'll give you an example. So, the first training session that I did, I had it was based on emotional intelligence. That was the topic, and I had a bunch of managers around, and so I did a lot of preparation. I read a lot of books. I tried a bunch of different things. I had this whole curriculum planned out, and we did it. And the first part of the morning went great. And I said everyone, well, let's take a 10-minute break. And everyone went outside the class, and I looked at my notebook to see, well, let me see where I am in my plan. And I realized that in the first part of the first morning, I had give like all the content from the day, because I was so focused. I was just saying things, just throwing information around. And suddenly I was left with like 6 hours of a training session that I didn't like plan at all. And so I remember like that 10-minute break was like 1 minute panicking and 9 minutes improvising. And what happened was I quickly realized that the way I approached it was, okay, so I have this whole information about emotional intelligence. What can I do? And I started to just connect different ideas. And I said, well, I can try to make a small game. So I created like this very easy, simple, childish games around the ideas that I had studied about emotional intelligence, and we did it, and it went great. In fact, after the training session, after the 2 day, it was a 2 day course. After the course, like the part that most people liked the most were the silly games that I made up in 9 minutes while they were having coffee and
Wow.
smoking their cigar, right? And so I remember like in the end of the training session, everyone left the room and I was alone, and I was like, what the hell happened there? And so I started to think about it, and I realized that what happened was I used my approach to improvisation in music to do it in corporate training, and just realizing that was like it was a fundamental shift in my worldview. I still believe that one of the things that I'm very, very, very good as a corporate trainer or as an educator is to improvise based on the situation that's happening, and that's due to spending like 7 years crafting perfecting that craft. So that was my long way to just explain how music impacted my worldview and still does almost every day. And there's also like ideas of like harmony, how to create harmony in chords, and how does that relate to creating harmony in your life, and these all ideas of tension and release. So there's a lot we can do a whole podcast just about it.
Oh my god, that is so fascinating. I definitely didn't think about the improvisation aspect. I was thinking about like more like the artistic part or like the creative part.
Mm,
But
mm.
yeah, it's very cool.
And
So
also,
yeah, go ahead.
no, so that also, but like, and a second skill that I just remember is listening. So when, because a lot of times when you're playing in a jazz band, what's happening is you need to listen to whatever is happening, so you can follow that invitation. So in a jazz band, what happens is every time someone plays something, that's an invitation for you to follow or to decline. And so that means that every jazz musician that's playing at a fairly good level is always trying to do a deep listening to everything happening. And so by practicing that a lot, when I was in a corporate training setting, or when I was or still am in a coaching session, like I do realize that I'm able to practice like this deep listening where I'm actually just focused on you and nothing else. So that's a second skill that comes from music, and I wanted to add. Sorry.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned emotional intelligence is something that you cover in your training. What
Yeah.
other services or what other topics did you also cover in a training
Yeah.
company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we did was we were focused on everything that was in the behavioral area, because we would have this approach where, because the people in the company were fast learners and we focused a lot of our time in learning how to learn, like it would happen, we would go to a company and they would say, oh, we need a session on time management, for instance. And we would say, okay, that's fine. And then we would just learn everything that there was to learn about time management and create a specific learning experience for that company. So that being said, like I did training sessions in a bunch of different areas. I did it in communication, motivation, leadership, goal setting, emotional intelligence, time management, stress management. I did in coaching as well. I did NLP, neuro linguistic programming as well.
Oh, nice.
Uh, and so I did a bunch of them. Yeah, I did those, or some that I'm remembering in. I also did like, and we did one on like the power of constructing metaphors, which is a very specific thing, but was one of my favorite workshops. And and yeah, I think that's. Oh, I also did one on the beliefs, like deep beliefs, how you like how your beliefs impact your life, and also another course on values, like how to define your personal values and align them with what you want in life. Those are some of the courses that I remember doing.
Well, it's interesting. So at first I thought it's you guys focus on a very specific range of topics and then you would pitch those topics to a company. But it sounds like you guys have this core strength of methodology of training. And you go
Yeah,
to the company and they give you a topic. So you have to learn about the topic before you deliver
yeah,
the training. So it's like you're a student and the teacher at the same time.
yeah, and so that's what makes it so interesting, because first of all, we only did that on behavioral area. I never thought anything like that was technical, or some technical in the sense like I didn't do programming or economics or anything like that. It was always on the behavioral area, because our methodology to learn was basically on that. It's possible to apply better on that area, but it usually what would end up happening was precisely what we were saying. So the issue would appear. The company would say, well, I want a training session on this or a course on this. And because we were at the same time the student and the teacher, what would happen was, well, I was learning something, and as I was learning, I was like, okay, so what's the best way, like what are some of the troubles that I'm having as a student to understand this? Oh, maybe the example that this teacher gave or this book gives, it's not the best example, or maybe this is somehow messy or it's very technical. So because I was a student, that would allow me to just understand what are some of the flaws in the reasoning of these teachers, of these books, of these courses, and then to just change it in a way that would be easier for any student to understand. And so when I was a teacher, I was going to share those in the easiest way possible, right? And so because of that, that allowed us to create like these very uh, easy and impactful and practical learning experiences. And to be honest, I think that was part of it. Still is, like, the company still exists. It's part of like the success that we had and that they have on teaching, is because we develop these learning experiences in a very original way. So that is part of my comment. And also, like, we did that for a while. Like in the first year we did that a lot, but then what happens is usually, like, most companies will focus on three to five areas. So we ended up like realizing, oh, okay, so we have these 3 to 5 areas, let's focus on making sure that every single edition of every single course on these areas just gets better and better and better. And so yeah, that would be like our approach to training.
I have a very big question for you. So like I can imagine someone dedicated a whole life into each of the topic and now you're given a very short period of time. How do you plan a scope of how much do you want to learn and how do you know that to what degree is enough?
Mm. So that's a big question. And are you talking like specifically to me, or just as general, as in
To you.
general?
And that's like I'm asking for myself too, because like I
Mm.
think for like working in the online education space, whenever you join whenever you help another creator, you're entering a whole new domain from like
Yeah,
studio to like nervous system
yeah,
to other stuff. So I'm always
yeah.
wondering how much is enough.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I'll give you my answer. Uh, I don't want to be the number one expert in none of these things. I never wanted. So, because that would mean that if I wanted to be like the number one on emotional intelligence, that would mean that I would have to focus like 80% of my time just learning about that and 20% of my time just learning about other things. And it's okay. There's a lot of people that want that, right? Uh, but because I'm a very curious person, I cannot find myself just imagining that, like, being focused around one specific area. So what I usually do is, I when approaching a course or a learning experience, I'll start to learn something new, and I'll try to come up. to arrive at a state where I feel like, oh, I've learned enough that I see that there are transformations in my behavior and in my life already. And after doing that, I'll go, okay, so those transformations are already happening. And in the back of my question, and in the back of my mind, I have the question, well, are these transformations enough for what the client wants? So that's very important, because we're talking about learning to create a course for someone, right? I'm not talking about learning for myself. In that case, if I'm working, if I'm helping a creator to develop his course or her course, if I'm designing a learning experience for a company, if I'm designing a training session for a company, like, my goal is, okay, so is there enough transformation in myself that if happens with the students, with the people from that company, would that be enough? Is that going to be enough, right? And usually, if that is already enough, that's when I say, okay, so that's okay, that's good, let's do the learning experience and see, right? So that would be like my answer, focusing on just when to stop when I'm designing a learning experience. Like, for myself, I usually don't impose any specific limit. Like, for as long as I'm interested in a certain topic, I will just be obsessed about it. And then there's a moment where I just know that, okay, maybe that's enough, let me switch to another topic, and I will do it that way. So yeah, basically, I think that would be my answer. I'm not sure if I answered like the way you wanted, but let me know.
Yeah. So, my follow up question would be like, what are some effective ways to deliver a transformational learning experiences for adults
So
specifically?
So that's a very complex question. I'll try to unpack it. So the first thing that you need to understand is that there are different types of learning experiences. So you have teaching, you have training, you have mentoring, and you have coaching. These four things are different, and usually what happens is online creators and any kind of almost an adult teacher will mix them up, and it will fail to access the full potential of their knowledge as a creator and as a teacher, and also of the learning experience that they're building. So what are the differences? First of all, teaching is focused on just sharing knowledge. So what I mean by this is, if you're designing a class and I'm teaching a class, I want you to gain a specific knowledge about something, like usually theoretical knowledge. So that's teaching. Training is focused on creating a behavioral transformation. And so that's one of the biggest difference, and usually people don't understand it. So when you're giving a training session to a company, you don't want them to know certain things. Like, sure, they can know certain things, that's good, but like the main focus has to be like, what kind of behavioral transformation I want these people to do. So, and that's like one of the most common mistakes in adult education, is that people just try to teach things to adults. One, either just giving them the knowledge and it's irrelevant, because usually adults don't want knowledge that much unless it really helps their lives. Or second, they actually want to create this transformation on this behavioral transformation on their students, but the creator himself or herself, because he or she is not thinking about this, is focused only on the knowledge that he or she knows, it creates like, it's harder for the student to understand what kind of change in my behavior I have to do, right? So that's a fairly common mistake. And then, just finishing up, I have mentoring, which the basic is just individual training, where based on the problems that you're presenting, I will give you like the best strategy. So it's almost like a training 101. And you have coaching, which where the focus is to basically ask questions so that the people get to the results that he or she wants. So a lot of times these are all mixed up, and the best way to create the best learning experience for an adult would be, okay, so what does this person want? If he or she wants just, if the student wants only pure technical knowledge, teaching is enough. If the student wants some kind of change, but not personalized change, training is the way to go. If someone wants like a specific strategy to solve a specific problem in their behavior, mentoring is the way to go. And finally, if people want to do some inner exploring in order to come up with their own solutions, coaching is the way to go. The main problem in adult education is that, like, a creator usually mixes them all up, right? And it fails to understand what kind of learning experience do I want to offer these students. And like the most common thing is just try to mix them all in one learning experience. So in the course, I'm being a mentor, and also I'm trying to be a coach, and I'm also trying to be to create this behavioral transformation. But I also want you to know this technical knowledge. And like the best thing that any creator can do is actually to stop and realize what's the most important thing for my students. And some students just want to get like the theoretical knowledge, and that's it. But other people want just the transformation, and you have to approach that. So that would be like the first common mistake is to not know what kind of learning experience, and the solution would be just focusing on the kind of the right learning experience for your students. The second mistake and principle that I personally believe it will help people is to basically understand the difference between pedagogy and andragogy. We talked about this in the call we did, where pedagogy is focused a lot on more on students, on younger students, and andragogy is learning for adults. And what ends up happening in these courses is that the instructor designs the learning experience based on pedagogy, meaning I like using the same principles that one uses to teach a young student, and it fails to realize that an adult will have a very fundamental different experience, life experience, and needs other things. And so that would be like the second principle. So what are some of these things? And now it's a long answer, sorry, but I'm just trying to unpack it all. So after realizing that what's the best learning experience model, and after you need to approach it with not pedagogy but andragogy. How you do that? Well, first of all, you understand what is the problem that I'm going to solve to my students. That's very, very important. Like you in each training session, you need to have a set of problems or a specific problem that you know you're going to solve. So that's one. The second one is to understand that adults bring some knowledge to the table, right? A lot of people create these courses that are purely passive, and like the big transformation, those courses where you see that people just are really passionate about the course and they're very, very like they're true fans of that course, come because they were given some space to speak. They were given some space to add value as well. Like it was not a thing where I was just listening to some information. I actually participated on that. I had some things to say, and people just and it resonated, and it helped the whole learning experience move forward. And so that's also a very common mistake, that you don't give enough space for people to share. And a third principle that I personally use in my courses, and it always works, is to bring a lot of humor. So learning is state dependent, meaning the way you feel will influence how much you learn, how you learn, and why you learn, right? If I'm feeling sad or if I'm feeling tired, the kind of learning that I'm willing to do on the learning experiences will be like very bad comparing to a situation where I'm feeling very energized, right? And so one of the best ways to put people on a mood that allows for learning to happen is through jokes. So because if you make a joke in a learning experience and I'm laughing, if I'm tired, suddenly because I'm laughing, I'm a little bit more active. But if I'm all over the top because I'm very high energy, if you're making a joke and I laugh, you're suddenly gaining the control of what the next mood will be. So here's an example. If I make a joke and suddenly everyone is laughing, I decide that the next step will be we either continue laughing and we'll continue that high energy going, or I'll switch to the joke is actually a metaphor for something very important, and I want you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to say, right? So basically humor allows you to break the pattern of whatever learning, whatever mood is happening, and then deciding what the mood is that you want your students to feel. So those three things would be like ways that we could drastically improve adult learning. And I'm not sure what was the original question, but I think I kind of answered it.
Yeah, well, my original question was what contribute to a successful
Yeah,
transformative learning experience. This is like
yeah,
super fascinating, especially the jokes part. Like I think a lot of time we ignore the emotional journey of how student experience before, during, and after the course. And I was
Yeah.
so inspired by our conversation last time that I kept thinking about it, and I came up with a theory. I told my husband, I was like, I think there are two heroes' journey involved in online education. Usually, a super passionate course was created by a creator who experienced something super important in their life. They went on this hero's journey and they realized, holy shit, if I know this 10 years ago, then I wouldn't have to go through all this um, detours. I can be where I am now way faster. And I want people to know this shortcut too. And that's why I'm
Yeah.
setting out to build a course.
Yeah.
And but when they're building the course, they enter a mode of knowledge delivery. And they forgot that there is another side of hero's journey, which is the student bring to the course. Like they come to the course. I claim they come to the course not because they want a set of skills. They want a transformation. They are looking forward to go on to their hero's journey. But these two
Yeah.
hero's journeys are cut off from each other because the knowledge transfer part doesn't really talk about the identity of the students, the hero's journey of a student. So
Mm,
like it for a course
mm,
has to be transformational. It has to know how to map the knowledge onto the student's hero's journey.
yeah.
And I was so proud of this theory. I told my husband, and he was like, "Oh, that's you. Like I don't care. Like, for people like me, I don't care. I just want a knowledge. Like
Yeah.
you're actually talking about two people, two type of people. One who know who they are, they're very sure about their existence in the world. They know how the road to succeed, and they join the course just for the knowledge. They don't care about the
Mm,
emotional stuff. There's
mm,
another type who is exactly you,
mm,
meaning me,
mm.
who wants like see life as a process of transformation and always looking for the next thing that can transform their life. And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, that is so true. And that you also just mentioned that too. Some people come here for
Yeah.
knowledge, some people come here for transformational experience. But
Yeah.
I think like the dilemma lies for online creator lies between in the cohort there will be different type of people and there will be different
Yeah.
type of things. So I think doesn't it kind of make sense for them to mix like training with coaching and mentoring in one cohort?
Yeah. So first of all, I would push back on Paul's answer because like I don't know, I had to talk with him, but like in my experience, the people that say, oh, I just want the knowledge, they don't want the knowledge, they want the structure to change something, a habit, or to fix a problem. Oh, I because knowing like a gazillion theories about time management is knowledge, but you don't want that. Actually, you want to be able to solve the problem that you have, which is basically how can I deal with so many tasks, for instance, right? So knowledge on itself, it's usually just um, like on leisure activities, right? I want to learn about this specific philosopher just because, right? I don't want that to change my life. I don't want to have any kind of uh, change through that. I just want to know that. I'm curious about Nietzsche and I want to do a course on it. So that's knowledge. Then you have like the behavioral part, the transformation, the behavior transformation. And so what ends up happening is you do have different personalities on a course, and it makes total sense to optimize the learning experience for different personalities. But that all all that is possible within the training session, because what connects both people that are focused, I just want the knowledge and that's it, and people that actually want some kind of like feeling of transformation, or they want like to feel like that was a journey. What connects both of them is I want to solve a specific problem, or I want to solve problems in my life, and I'm really hoping that this course will help you with that. So what you need to do is, once you understand what problems you solve as a course creator, you need to understand what are different meaningful ways I can bring up to this course that will help different people, right? So I'll give you an example. I once worked in a company. I did a training in a session in a company where they mixed both the people from HR, which are usually more emotional people, connective people that want the transformation part, and engineers, which are very pragmatical, technical, and want the data and that's it. And so what happens is both of them would have, so first of all, they will have different problems, of course, but as a trainer, and that's why any learning experiences start by focusing on the students, like doing the student, like listening to the students and understand what's the need that the students have. And so what I did was I understood like what are some of the common problems among these two people, and I realized that one of them was how to deal with pressure. So even though engineers were very practical and very just focused on knowledge and very oriented to I just want to understand the knowledge and to leave, technically they didn't want the knowledge, they wanted to solve a problem of stress. The other people were like, oh, but there's a lot of things going wrong in the company, and I want to solve them all, and I need like this transformation. I need to have an identity shift so I can help the company to achieve another thing, another area, another level. And so what connects them both was this idea of dealing with stress. Once I figured that out, it becomes actually a game. So I have the problem. I want these people to deal better with stress, and me as a trainer, me as a course creator, what I need to do is understand, well, what are some very different ways that I can share the strategies that allow you to live better with stress, and in a way that resonates first with some engineers and then with like the HR people. And what I want to do is I want to create these experiences or these games or the way I'll convey this knowledge. I want to do it in a way that when I'm focused on engineers, like most engineers will love it, and maybe like 20% of the like 80-20, so maybe 20% of the HR people will like it. And then I'll focus on something that 80% of the people on HR will like it, and only 20% of the engineers will. So that means for engineers, in that case, for engineers, was just presenting a bunch of data of studies that done around anxiety and stress and ways to deal with it, different strategies to cope with that. And on the other side, with other people, was just sharing experiences where they already had faced stress, and for some reason they ended up just being able to push through it. And they sharing like what were some of their own strategies, right? And so what ended up happening in that learning experience was I would switch between these two approaches, like every 30 minutes I was switching the approach. And what ends up happening is because they're starting to touch, they're starting to understand different ideas or different strategies to solve their problem. They end up not only feeling that their needs as a learner are being met because, oh, this guy, I'm an engineer, this guy's giving me a lot of data, I'm loving it, but also like I'm starting to see the value of sharing some stories because those people over there, they just share stories and they really enjoy it. So maybe next time I'll try to share a story of my own and see how does that make me feel in this learning experience, right? And they do it, and suddenly they feel great. But and then the HR people are like, oh, I'm so used to sharing these stories. I'm really enjoying. This guy is giving me the things that I need. And I'm also looking at engineers, and I'm looking how they're processing data, and they just are learning that much about different ways and specific strategies and specific frameworks. Maybe I'll try that too. And what ends up happening is by designing a complete learning experience, you will end up having both type 1 and type 2 people on the same learning experience and having like feeling that their learner needs are being met, and also exploring part of the other type um, needs in a learning experience. But that's only possible if you as a creator have like this, first of all, a very deep knowledge on the topic and on different ways to convey it, of course, and then keep alternating between type 1, type 2, type 1, type 2, so that they themselves start to question their own type and embrace the possibilities of learning in different ways. That was a very long answer, sorry. But did it help? Was I clear?
Yeah, it's very clear. It's mind blowing. It's so good.
Thank you.
I can definitely see this was happening in some of the big like very um the big online courses that has very active community members in size. Now
Yeah,
I like kind of like you open my door of seeing, oh, this is what was going on in those courses for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, now yeah.
And I was just saying that it also it's really, and that's why when you're a course creator, one of the things that you really need to understand is like when you're outlining the course. Besides, and I wrote a Twitter thread on this. So besides outlining the course and the knowledge that you want to convey, also from time to time had what kind of emotion do you want people to have, and like, and that will allow you to optimize to different people. So if I want people to feel focused, I need to make sure that the examples that I'm giving and the exercises and tasks that I'm giving are, and the environment that I'm creating, like the music that's playing or the kind of slides that I'm projecting or sharing, are optimized for that emotion. And usually when you have focused people, like the type one, the engineer will love it because, oh, this is my moment. This is the moment where I need to just grind, connect here, and that's great. But also if you have like, oh, in this part of the learning experience, I want people to have to feel like very joyful. So I'll have like maybe a picture of a dog, and I'm telling a story about like a funny story, and that allows for people to feel that. And like the type two people will be like, oh, that's so great. I'm having this emotional experience. So just having some, being very deliberate in what kind of emotions do you want people to feel in your learning experiences would probably solve like 80% of the problems in adult teaching, in my personal opinion.
That is perfect. Thank you so much. So, course creators, if you're listening, you know who to go to to seek expertise, advice on creating your own course. Now, I want to
Yes.
switch gear a little bit. So, through this training experiences, you realize you actually realize what is a go. Wait, I'm stuttering here. What is a modern golden age like
Mm, mm,
for
mm.
for
So
for yeah, for human beings? So, would you like to talk about like how do you how do you the story behind you starting the
yeah,
modern golden age podcast?
yeah, and being interested in that all that. So yeah, so that's another long story that I'll try to keep short. I had a previous podcast where I interviewed people, because I co-founded this corporate training company, and I met a lot of people doing weird jobs. And I was working with high schoolers that would sometimes say to me, like, I can either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. And I was like, no, that makes no sense. And I'll try to, and so I created this podcast because I had very interesting friends and I want to showcase them to kids. So that was like my first podcast. I loved it, but there was a moment where I started to feel some dread doing another episode, and I quickly realized that the conversations that I was having on that podcast weren't the kind of conversations that I wanted to have. And so I started to think, well, what kind of conversation do I want to have? And suddenly one day I was scrolling to Twitter, and Visa, which I think you know, shared like this meme of the dominoes meme, I call it. It's called If We Play Our Cards Right. And basically it's like a bunch of dominoes align, and it implies that if we tackle the first, which is something like finding more friendly ambitious nerds, if you tackle all of them, the last domino would be a golden age of humanity. And I looked at that meme and I was moved by it. I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, and I want to be part of this golden age of humanity, but how can I do it? Because my ideas aren't deep enough for me to just go out there and share it. I don't have a clear vision of what a modern, of what a golden age look like. So what can I do? And once again, I look back at my own things and I was like, oh, okay, I'm very, very curious. I consider myself a full-time learner because I want to be always learning something. I'm fairly good at having conversations and asking questions. So maybe I can do a podcast uh, talking with people about this specific idea of a golden age. And I call it a modern golden age because so I did some research and I realized that all the golden ages before are geographically bound. So what I mean is all the golden ages that previously happen in specific places, like physical places, because very talented and ambitious people were connected there. But like with the internet, for the first time, you can have a modern golden age where suddenly the place where you are, it doesn't matter anymore. Like the physical place doesn't matter, and because you can connect with ambitious and like-minded people online, and these communities will first create this modern golden age online, and then it will leak out into real life. And so I basically tried to come up with this perfect vision of a modern golden age. I realized I couldn't do it. It didn't make any sense. And so I started a podcast just to talk with people. And what I want to do is I want to talk with 100 different people and at a given moment in our conversation, ask them the same questions and then compare 100 answers and realize, well, what's the pattern here? Like, what are some of the things that everyone mentions? And then maybe share with people like, oh, I've talked with 100 people about this idea of a modern golden age. And like the thing that everyone says is that we have to be kinder to each other. So how can we like create like something that's actionable around it? And yeah, so that's how I get into the modern golden age. Is a topic that I'm obsessed with. And yeah, I try to talk with people about interesting projects that they're building and how that connects with humanity reaching a modern golden age. Yeah, that's it. That's how I ended up in
What
it.
do you think would be the next step for this podcast?
Mm, that's a great question. So I know I have to, after finishing like the second season of the podcast, which is like in 5 to 6 weeks, I need to write like like an introduction to sharing like the lessons that I've learned so far. And I think after doing that, I like the next step of the podcast may start because it will give me some credibility among people and have like a thing where I can point out to that says, look, I've talked with 20 different people about this topic of a modern golden age. This is everything that I've learned. So I guess that would be like a part of it. Um, and the second one is just like maybe the amount of um, dedication that I bring to the podcast. Like I love the conversations, but I'm not good at the other part, like marketing the podcast and having like this very just like yourself, like having this very beautiful background with all these like details. Like I haven't got the time and actually the energy to dedicate to that. But I think that's part of like the next step in the podcast. Um,
Mm.
yeah, that's it.
Or like another relevant question would be like, with this, what do you want to do with the podcast?
Mm.
What I mean
Oh.
is like after building the podcast, is this the next step
Mm.
to like the
Mm.
community or
Yeah, yeah. So sorry. Yeah, because I misunderstood your question. So,
I think I
yeah.
missed.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
the point is, I want to be a connector. What I want to do is one day I want to be like the person that's within the community that's building a modern golden age and is able to point out exactly who do you need to talk to in order to like bring your project to fruition. And I want to do that in many different ways. The first one is by knowing everyone. Of course, everyone is an overstatement, but by knowing a lot of people that are working on a golden age, that will allow me to make those connections. And so creating the podcast and building like the podcast to that point is one of the focus. The second one is I want to create a hub where people can come and work in projects that are related to the golden age and then leave. And fortunately, there's a lot of interest in this. There's a lot of people already doing that. And I found that amazing. Like you have people doing that in Berlin and people doing that on the US. And I found that very good. I want to do it in Portugal. And I want to do it in a moment where I feel like I know enough people to be able to create connections that these individuals wouldn't consider for themselves. So what I mean by this is maybe I know maybe you know someone that I know as well, but like you think about that person in a way, and I because I know both of you, I see. Oh, but wait, like in in reality, like Angie would love to work with John because John has like this and this project that Angie doesn't know about. But if they connected, they can create a third bigger project. And so I want to create like this hub when I feel that I'm already in a position of knowing enough people to create these connections. Um, and yeah, that would be like my last goal for the podcast to be able to create a community and then to create this physical space in Portugal where people can come and work in projects that are somehow related to a modern golden age.
Nice. Looking forward to see that project comes true.
Yeah, me
Okay.
too.
Now, so you share a lot of your expertise, your stories of founding a company and then founding the podcast. And I know a backstory that we shared when we were during a meetup. And I would like to, like you said, to transition to our next focus of the interview, which is our journey as bilingual creator. So the
Yeah.
backstory is like I told you that I recently quit writing and then or like interviewing in Chinese because I feel like I'm moving to the States and then like I'm not really connected with the Chinese part of me anymore. And I wanted people to know I want to connect to like the creators who I will be meeting, who I will be really like physically based. And when I make the announcement, it was really hard for me because it, apparently not apparently like in Taiwan we were brought up in a way that not being able to speak good English is a humiliation. Like you should be shameful for yourself if you don't speak good English. And like it's definitely not just a tool. There's so much cultural implication of this language. You're literally driving on the road and you'll see a big billboard on the skyscraper that say, don't embarrass yourself when you cannot reply English native speakers questions. Sign up for our English class. Stuff like that.
Holy moly.
Yeah, only later that I visited other Asian country that I realized it's special for Taiwan. Other people like I think
Mhm.
I don't see Japan or Chinese China has the same type of marketing
Mhm.
strategy for English classes. And so
Mhm.
when I announced that I wanted to started to create English to I tried to put my most authentic, the most like heartful energy out to show that I'm not choosing to create in English because I think English is better than Chinese, but because of other stuff. And then you also
Yeah.
share a story that you were originally writing a Portuguese newsletter and then you switched to English newsletter. Could you share with
Yeah.
our audience that?
Yeah. 100%. So I started to write on the internet a long time ago, and I always did it in Portuguese. And even now, if people subscribe to my newsletter, they'll see that the newsletter was created like 3 or 4 months ago because that was finally the moment where I realized I'm going to talk about a modern age here. But like I've been writing for a long, long time, and I did it first in Portuguese in social media. I had like one or two Facebook pages, and then I did it on my own personal pages, and then I finally created like this newsletter in Portuguese. And I really enjoyed speaking and writing in Portuguese because it's like it's my language, so I know how to formulate impactful sentences. I know how to formulate beautiful sentences. I know how to formulate like educational sentences. Like it's natural. But it came to a point where I realized, well, why am I writing? So my question was, why am I writing? And I realized that, well, I'm writing because I want to attract more opportunities. And then we'd be like, oh, okay, so if I'm writing to attract opportunities, and I need to understand, like, is writing in Portuguese increasing like the amount of opportunities that I have? And I was like, okay, maybe if I'm focusing on like Brazil, because Brazilians are a lot of people, and I can go that route. But like that's not what I want. So, by to maximize opportunities, I need to switch to English. And so I actually did like 2 or 3 like test posts where I would send like a post that was in English, and I had like this intro saying, "Oh, this is like I would make this up, like, oh, this post is I'm writing this in English because like I have a foreign friend that only speaks English that asked me to do so." And I would just send this out and see the reaction of people, and I would quickly realize that people wouldn't even just open the newsletter or would actively ask, "Well, why are you writing in English? Like, what are you trying to do?" Like, we have this Portuguese expression which is like "tas mar," okay, which would be something like, "Oh, it's basically who do you think you are?" Uh, and so yeah, I did that, and then I realized, well, I want to switch to English because the opportunities that I want to attract are way easier in English. And there was a bunch of self doubt around it, of course. Like, I'm going to butcher the words, I'm going to make mistakes, no one will like it, all that stuff. But at the same time, like, my first decision was I need to write in English because I want to explore those opportunities. So, what I did was I created a second newsletter only in English, and I didn't tell anyone except my mother and my father. That was it, like, and my girlfriend. But only, but even her, I was like, look, I'm doing this experiment. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this or not, but if you want to check it out, it's here. It will be in English, so there's that. And she was very supportive, of course. But like, I didn't tell anyone, and I started like from scratch all over again because I didn't want people to know that I was writing in English, because being a native speaker, like, people, first of all, just the mere fact that you're writing online, people were like, who do you think you are, what do you have to say, like, what, whatever. And there's that, and also there's that because I'm also like I'm a fairly young person. I'm a 26-year old. Like, a lot of my friends are like still on building like their own careers, and so they would be looking at me sharing like, oh, hey, here's how you do something. They'll be like, oh, you're only like, you're a young guy, you don't have like, I'm 26, but back then I was like 20 or 21. And people will be like, oh, you don't, like, who do you think you are, like, you're only 21, you have nothing to share, so just stop it, and all that stuff. So, like, that plus like writing in English, I just didn't want to deal with the emotional stress that would come from having people like saying, oh, yeah, like, João thinks he's the greatest, he's writing in English, oh, look at Mr. Fancy Pants, oh my, right. So, yeah, basically that was it. I just created a whole newsletter. I didn't tell anyone that I was doing it, and I started to build an audience in English from scratch.
I resonated with that so much. Like Taiwan, it's such a hierarchical culture as well. We definitely overvalue the importance of age. Like,
Mm,
so in some contexts, like the fitness industry I work in before, like you cannot, you are forbidden. It's like an unwritten rule. You are forbidden to call the person by their name. You have to call them
yeah,
senior or junior based on your age when you enter the same school, even though you already graduated school like 20 years
yeah,
already.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like I definitely see like that's definitely like lots of my fear coming up when I wanted to create in English. And I think the word you use, opportunity, is very interesting for me now that you said it again. Like, one of the reason why I wanted to create English is like I do want an opportunity, like more opportunities. And the opportunities is not just financial opportunities, but also like an opportunity to for me to be a different self. Like,
Mm,
if I create English, like no one would shit on my age, no one would tell me
mm,
that you're not qualified. And
mm,
especially I was in a very like warm, nice, happy corner of Twitter full of write up passage people. Whatever I tweet, whatever
yeah,
I say, people are like, oh my god, Angie, I love your writing, it's so
yeah,
inspiring. And so it's like I finally like get the affirmation from a community that I never thought of before. I
yeah,
I think like whenever, even now when I create it in Chinese, even though I do have some like very supportive creator friends, I can also like imagine what other creator will say about me, or like who she
yeah,
thinks she is. Oh, her stuff is maybe not that good, because I do
yeah,
see myself like the dark side of me coming up when I'm commenting on a person's English work and a person's Chinese work. And so
yeah,
like I still couldn't reconcile that part, although I do think that I've come a long way, that I try to integrate the two. Especially like I just wrote an article these few days about like being a mother who wants to raise a bilingual kid. Like I have to reconcile the two. But still it's
yeah.
like, man, I totally resonated with you so much. And I want to know, what do you think that you will be able to like to bridge the gap between the two of you, like the two sides of you?
Yeah, so I don't see it as like two sides. I see it like as more like as two approaches. Uh, and so the way that I'm thinking about it is basically because I lean on English and I certainly created a positive momentum on my own writing. And part of it, like when we met, you mentioned, like you failed to mention that you wrote this amazing article on being precisely a bilingual writer and like your experience on that. And I read that article and I was like, look, you're the one who wrote this article, right? And you have no idea how that changed me, because there in that article, you're saying that a lot of people that were natives were also doing like basic mistakes on English, and they were just having the same self-doubt that you were having. I was like, oh my God. So that is not like a problem that I have as a Portuguese. It's a problem that everyone has as a writer. And so because of that, and because I started to build like a more positive momentum, and because I started to have way more conversations in English with different people, and I saw like there's people that I know that are not native speakers, that write really really well, and I talked with them and realized that in conversation their English was basically the same level as mine. And I was like, oh, okay, so like it's all this self doubt, and all these questions. Like the only difference between me and people that I put up here as bilingual creators is just purely how comfortable I am on being on a process to be better, right? And that was like a fundamental shift. And so what ended up happening was like I started to be way more comfortable in with the fact that I'm writing in English, and also because I do right now, I do all my writing in English almost. Like I do my publishing on English, I do my journaling on English, like except for things that are mandatory Portuguese, like I'll do the rest of it in English. And so because I'm having like that practice, I'm feeling more and more comfortable with it. And so right now I'm very confident in saying, meeting an old friend and be like, oh yeah, I write some things, and you can just go to this website and check it out, and it's in English, right? I don't, it's not a problem anymore in that sense. What I do believe is like harder to bridge the gap is like the cultural aspect of language. So and we talked about this as well, like American people and English spoken people, but like most of the creators that I know in companies that I want to work with are Americans. So there's that. They have a very different culture from Portugal, and we talked about this on our call as well. And like being able to create this new uh like culture where I still remain with the things that are typical Portuguese and I like, but also embrace the American part of it, or the English speaking part of it. That's a harder bridge to pass. And what I'm doing basically is I'm trying to look at everything that Portuguese gives me that I like, and getting that, and then understanding the things that I don't like and trying to replace it either by American or by any other country actually. Like uh and so yeah, that's like where I'm at right now in that topic.
Nice. Yeah,
How about you? I would love to listen, like not only in speaking but like in culturally speaking, like how are you balancing those two things?
uh-huh. Yeah, first of all, I want to say that when we were in a meetup and then you told me you read my article, that was so like that was also like a very very shocking moment for me. I was happy for many many days afterward that someone I met from like a different side of a corner of the world. I can't believe he read my article. This is like so cool. Like I'm so glad it was. That article is such a struggle. Like putting myself out there and then I just being very vulnerable. Is saying that I actually struggled with this before and blah blah blah. It just, oh man, that was very cool. That's just such a cool, like it's a very transformative moment of my life. And so
Great.
like yeah, we talk about how both like Portuguese and Taiwanese culture want us to be humble, and then
Yeah.
it's just not useful to be in an environment where where the culture doesn't value humbleness. And I thought this is something that we grew up with, another native language that we speak with will face. But I just talked to another Asian American who was born and raised here yesterday, and then he told me that it's so uncomfortable for him to be as aggressive as other Americans as well because he was brought up in the immigrant family in the States, and then he still had
Mm,
that side of him. And I was like, man, this is just not fair. Like I wish I was born in a culture that is that maybe so comfortably showing who I am. I think I've come a long way of not trying to be too humble when talking with Americans, but still like there are situations where I feel like I'm already putting out the American side of me. And the person
yeah,
would say, "Oh, come on, stop underselling yourself." And I was like, "Wait, am I doing that
yeah,
again?" Still like unconsciously. So I was like,
yeah,
what till what day would I comfortably say that I am not being aggressive? I'm just confidently showing myself, and the other person
yeah,
also think that I'm confidently showing myself. I think
yeah,
I don't know if they will be resolved in this lifetime.
yeah,
I hope so, but I do think like needing to succeed in a total different culture, like I need to learn how to overcome discomfort of like doing something against mother my mother
yeah,
culture's norm, the
yeah,
culture known of my mother culture. And
yeah,
I think like I do, and I also really resonated with you that I feel so smart speaking Chinese. Like I know how to use the most complicated word, the most complicated sentence, and I can write I read the most philosophical paragraph ever. And then when I speak in English, I speak like a kiddo. And I write like a
yeah,
kiddo. And I think these days I just learned to enjoy that. I learned to enjoy like not to think about one thing too complicatedly, but like express a thing as it is. I found
yeah,
there is a certain liberation in that too. Like when I
yeah,
was learning Spanish, it's even more so. Like I was I was in Mexico, and then no one knows my life stories. I was so lonely. I want to make friends. The only friends I have is my Spanish teacher. But the only words I came out with is I'm from Taiwan. I'm 34 years old. I am happy.
yeah,
And I was
yeah,
like, but I want to tell him like I'm this like empowerment coach. I feel this cool stuff, but I don't have any of the language. But I think it's actually good because it forced me to get rid of some part of the identity I'm attaching so much and going back to
yeah,
like the fundamental of who I really am and how do I experience these things most directly without too much interpretation.
yeah,
But if there is a time where I feel like I still have so much to say, and if I write in English, no one will understand. I couldn't express myself in English either. Then I will write it in Chinese and I will
yeah,
publish on my Chinese Instagram or newsletter.
yeah,
That's my strategy so far. Yeah.
yeah. No, and like just so, like in my opinion, like I want to have that level of assertiveness when talking about the things that I've done, but I also don't want to lose like some sensibility because I have like this experience, and I'm not generalizing, but there are a lot of Americans that I met that are way over the top. Like there's sometimes I've met people that I don't know they can so in Europe we enjoy football, which for American people is soccer. But like we enjoy football uh, and like I've met Americans that can just do like basic things like just having the ball on their feet and just balancing with 3 or 4 times just with their feet, and like they go and say, oh, I'm very good at soccer, you want to see me play, and they do that, and like any Portuguese kid can do that, right? And so sometimes I think that that's an exaggeration, and I don't want to get there because even though I want to be completely comfortable in sharing the things that I do, and I know that I can be a lot more. Like doing this podcast, like 3 months ago, would be like the most uncomfortable thing. Even if I was speaking English as good as I am right now, the mere fact that I would be here just speaking about all the things that I've done and all the things that and all these companies that I've worked with, it was weird. And I'm constantly looking forward and working for a future where I can just be confident in what I already do. But I don't want to lose that edge that comes from, oh, but I can do more, but I want to push myself, or maybe I did that, but I also like, so that part of culture, like that accessibility, I still want to remain. To me personally, one of the things that I did in order to become like more comfortable in articulating better my ideas was, first of all, like changing everything, every kind of writing that I do to English, and like changing journaling was a big step because I journal a lot, and it made me like sometimes a thought would come up in my head in Portuguese with specific words that could be replaced but would lose like the strength of the thought, and so I would force myself, no, I want to learn how to say that specific word because that's the feeling or that's the idea I want to convey. And so doing that was a big step. And another one very big was just read more fiction in English, because usually in English I would read nonfiction and I would focus on Portuguese books for fiction, and also reading fiction in English, like the kind of words, the non-technical words, like they pop up and I have no idea what they are, and I just try to learn them and have like this whole document with different words that I want to learn and want to integrate in my vocabulary because they're beautiful words. And so those are some of the practices that I'm doing in order to be able to become even more comfortable in English. And also having like conversations with people has been like a life changer. Like 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I met the first international friend like that came from Israel. He came from Portugal, and I met him, and we spent the morning together. And only after he left, I was like, man, I actually was able to maintain the conversation without just overthinking what I was saying or having problems articulating the kind of thoughts that I wanted to do. Like I was presenting in my hometown, and like we have a monastery filled with history, and I told him like the whole history around the monument, and I was like, oh, nice. I'm reaching a level where I can be more comfortable in a way that I speak, and consequently in the way that I write. And that happened because of those three things: just switching journaling to English, having more conversations, and reading fiction in English as well.
Well, that's interesting. I think for me, I also see like 3 months ago, the conversation with you is that would not happen. I would just be so afraid reaching out to you, and I will be constantly analyzing like, oh shit, I just used the wrong tense. I say he instead of she. I say she instead of he. Oh my god, how am I going to cover? How am I going to carry on the next the rest of the podcast interview? But I think for me, like what really changed, and I was thinking about these days. What really changed for me is like not my English ability, but like how worthy I think I am in terms of connecting with other people. And I think that being a mother definitely made me have to like be courageous and then start like get buried in my own drama, and then I just like wanting to like the best for my kid, and also like and so like through that I know how to be a courageous person. And
Yeah,
because of that I started to feel like I am not I am not worthy of a connection just because I made some English mistakes. I think writing
yeah,
that article definitely helped me throughout sort out a lot of this. And I every moment I am so comfortably talking with you now. I am so like amazed and proud of myself. And yeah, I hope like this will I yeah I hope that this will continue for sure.
yeah.
And what am I gonna say? I forgot, but yeah.
It
There are
happens.
definitely times that like during our conversation I was like, oh holy shit, I made this mistake. I'm going to edit out this later, and then the next moment the Angie the more comfortable Angie would come in and say, no, just put the podcast out. Like
Yeah,
what the content of your conversation is much more important than the mistake I made.
yeah,
So like I think by putting out the mistake, it will also force me to accept this part of me and be a
yeah.
braver creator too. Oh, I remember.
One hundred
So like,
percent.
yeah, I think that about journaling, like I intentionally, I also just realized that I was analyzing my journaling, and then I will be bitching about my life in the most like sarcastic and depressing way. Like, you are you are a piece of shit. Why do you do this to that? You didn't do anything like in
Yeah,
Chinese. Like you say
yeah,
you're going to publish this thing. You say you're going to write on time. You never did it. I am so
yeah,
disappointed at you. And then I will start writing in English. Say, but at least you did so many things already, and I'm still proud of you.
Mm,
Like, I love you and blah blah blah. And I said, wow, this is
yeah,
really too cultural identity, just like changing
yeah,
automatically depending on the I'm going to say a negative
the
stuff about
mood,
myself
yeah,
or the positive stuff about myself. Yeah,
yeah,
that's so interesting. Oh my
that
god, this is such a great
absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like, and but I think that maybe it's just that language is like a vehicle for like alternative language is a vehicle for us to express like the shadow part of ourselves.
Mm.
Maybe if you like, because I get what you're saying, but the thing is, maybe if he switched, I'm not sure if he decided to switch to English, like that voice would disappear, because I don't think that's just related to language, but also like to a part that we all have, right, that sometimes does not make us that happy. But like, talking to the mistakes, like, I actually am against, like, I never edit my mistakes in actually anywhere. So what I mean by this is, if I'm recording a video and suddenly I'm recording something, and I'm like, oh, I shit, I forgot the word, or I'm not making like my point come through, that I'll just stop and I'll record it. But once it's like a take, like, or once it's a conversation, I'll never edit it out, because what I want to do is I want to be able to, in 5 years, look at a podcast interview that I did and just say, I came from that. That was where I was, and this is where I am right now. And if I edit and suddenly it seems all perfect, like, I will I won't be able to feel the joy from that comes from growing and from learning in long like in the long enough term, right? And so that's why I'll edit, like, in my podcast I'll edit everything that the guest wants, but my things, like my mistakes, my moments where I'm going, I'm not sure what's the word, or the moments where I say something and I'm like, oh, that's not like the proper way, I'll leave it everything there, because in 5 years down the line, I will look at them, and will be like, oh, yeah, that's where I was. That's crazy. And because and maybe I'm just thinking about this, right? But because when I was in music, I would record all like, I would record me playing, and I would look down and see, oh, that's so funny. When I was starting, and this would seem very hard, and now I play that, like, with my eyes closed behind my back, right? And so, like, I was always used to this idea of just recording the mistakes so you can then see your progress. And I believe that's a very good practice to have as a creator as well.
This is your growth testimonial for yourself. It's
Yeah.
going to like nice. Thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful conversation. For the last part, I would like to ask you, what will the golden age look like for your life?
That's a very deep question. Uh, like, I believe that part of a golden age in my personal life will definitely be around, first of all, having a family. I'm a very family oriented person, like, and so that's definitely there. And I do see, like, the full manifestation of a modern golden age, or of a golden age in my life, will have to have like a family for sure. Also, like, creating new institutions that allow humanity to surpass current level and be able to achieve a next level will definitely be part of it as well. And and yeah, I think that, and definitely not only creating institutions, but also, like, somehow being connected to education. I do believe that's part of my calling. um so yeah, those would be like three things. So first, having a family. Second, like, meeting other people that are somehow like-minded. Third, bringing new institutions would be like the manifestation of a golden age in my life.
Nice. Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
if our students,
No,
if our
students.
audience want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the best way to do it is either through Twitter at João Goaolmateus, João L Mateus, or on my Substack, which is basically the same thing. Substack.com. That's where I publish like the episodes of my podcast, my own writing, and yeah, that will be it. You can also search for the Modern Age podcast in your favorite podcast platform, and it will probably be there.
Thank you so much. I will also put the links in the show note. Now,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you so much for the interview.
And
Bye.
it was a pleasure. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.